Hey everyone, if you're watching this after my video on the no weapons or spells run, welcome back. If you haven't yet seen it, I highly urge you go check it out, either now or when you finish this video, if you like it. Okay, enough begging, let's get started. There's no point standing on ceremony or anything here, the real challenge is really simple. Can you beat Baldur's Gate 3 only using bonus actions? The answer may shock you. This time, we're playing as the Jonkler, a half-orc rogue who's ready to destroy the illithid threat with one hand tied behind her back, both literally and metaphorically. As always, we awaken the illithid pod, leaping out and getting our bearings. First thing to do is take stock of what resources we have available to us. We have frighteningly little, but the clothes on our back and a short sword bound to our main hand. This gives us access to the Flourish ability, a weapon attack that, get this, only costs a bonus action. Lae'zel appears and we move into the first fight of the game. The Githyanki fighter begins with a longsword, which grants the ability Pommel Strike if the wielder is proficient with the item. It deals a single d4 of damage, which isn't usually a lot of damage, but with enough rounds of... you can only use it once per short rest. Okay.
Catch a break.
The same rules apply to Flourish, but something interesting happens here. I wonder if you know why this happens. I try to wriggle my way through the fight by pushing the imps off the ledges, but they don't die and just instead return to where they were pushed from. I also remember that there's a body in this room that has weapons on it, so on my turn I move to it and equip the weapons it's got on it, but it actually turns out that equipping an item costs an action during combat. And for some reason I started this one in honor mode, so I couldn't just restart from the start, so I had to create a new save file. Moving forward, it's just going to be in tactician mode, but we play as the Jonkler, a half-orc barbarian who has the cool little bonus of starting with a pair of hand axes which can be dual wielded, granting us access to the common ability known as offhand attack melee. It's like a melee attack, but using the offhand weapon, to a weaker effect. Using this earth-shattering new weapon attack, we're able to move about the battlefield whittling away at the imps. Lae'zel gets a nice pommel strike in, knocking out an imp. Dealing what can only be referred to as chip damage, our opponents fall away, granting us access to the corpses with these new light weapons on them. I equip a scimitar and a hand axe on Lae'zel, which also grants her access to a new era of bonus action-based combat. As is customary, we free Shadowheart from her entrapment inside this pod, arming her with a pair of hand axes, setting us up for the fight on the bridge. We roll out as a death squad, wailing on the same enemy all at the same time to maximise the amount of kills we can get per turn, which is usually one. Lae'zel uses her precious bonus action to heal herself, and the Jonkler uses hers to enter rage mode. With this substantial damage boost, we're able to punch through and access the neural transponder, beaming the Nautiloid to the material plane and sending us plummeting from a hole in the hull. Landing safely on the ground, we're ready to begin our adventure in earnest. I wake Shadowheart up, preparing for our fight ahead. Shadowheart actually has access to a couple more abilities than we can make use of, like Healing Word. It's a healing spell that only costs a bonus action, as well as a spell slot, but the main takeaway is that we have a way to heal. Fully aware of how powerful these intellect devourers are at the start, I opt to sneak past them. I'm going to allow sneaking while out of combat, as it would usually cost an action during combat, but I think it's fine when just traversing the world. I meet with Astarion, the man with the golden voice. As usual, he tries to murder us, but I use a bonus action to roll away and become his best friend.
Apologies.
I let him join the party, as many hands make light work. And it might be especially true when your best damage roll is a crisp 4. He promotes to level 2, which gives him access to the Cunning Action catalogue of abilities, allowing him to sneak, dash, and disengage during combat only using a bonus action. I arm Astarion with a pair of daggers, a weapon befitting his station. I get a few good hits in on this intellect devourer, and Astarion does this weird thing where he deals 2 instances of damage. How is he doing that? The damage he can deal is very valuable, even if I don't understand it. I clear the wreckage of Brain Men and pass through on toward the Emerald Grove. I dislodge Gale from the rock, filling the final position of the party. He's a mere placeholder though, as I stumble upon Lae'zel not too much further up. She is trapped in a cage, which I realise I can't actually shoot down as I don't have a way to deal range damage yet, so I asked the tieflings to shoot her down and then turn on them, which is a real shame because I'm usually not all about tiefling murder, but needs must. Since Lae'zel isn't a member of my party for this fight, she uses this loophole to use as many actions as she would like. I also use this fight to explain that I'm also banning the use of reactions. It's a resource, much like actions, and it should be treated as such. Opportunity attacks also use the main hand exclusively, which is kind of an action, technically. That being said, I'm going to use the help action exclusively outside of combat. There's already enough tedium in this run, I say to myself. We wrap up this fight and move towards the Emerald Grove, where it seems that the goblins have appeared ready for a fight. We use our Death Ball approach, swarming on a single enemy at a time as we make our way through. A well-placed strike from Astarion wraps up the fight and we're invited in.
Inside! All of you, more may follow!
Aradin uses his bonus action to knock Zevlor out. We help him out and he tells us of the druid Holson, who apparently knows everything about everything and we should go find him to get the worms out of our heads. I move towards the crypt in the east, using stealth to initiate combat and dealing surprisingly little damage. Despite a few good attacks from Astarion and the Junkler, our party gets wiped and we're forced to reload. I change up the approach at the beginning, pushing the halfling off of his crate and having the rest of the party in stealth, which lets me draw out the melee users while I sneak around the other side to push the wizard off the opposing wall. Astarion sneaks up to the prone caster and gets a critical hit, dealing 12 damage on an offhand strike. Not bad. Now that we no longer have the threat of a powerful wizard looming over us, we're able to attack from two fronts and collapse on the remaining enemies. The Jonkler is soaking up the aggro from the fighters, which leaves the other members defenseless to be picked off by Astarion and Gale. Surrounding this guy, we take turns slicing him into ribbons while the Jonkler does her good work over here, with Shadowheart joining in at the end to finally wrap up this encounter. Entering the crypt, both Andorn and Mari fall to our flurry of weak blows. Knowing that our collective strength will not be enough for a larger team battle, I resolve to try and break through this door to skip the lever in the fight entirely. Since the door is sturdy, it won't take any damage from attacks dealing less than 10 damage. Since it's weak to slashing damage, we can easily break it as our max hit in this case would be a 12. I equip the Junkler and Lae'zel with torches in the offhand, which does bludgeoning and fire damage. The former the skeletons are actually weak to. We get some pretty impressive attacks out of these torches, and the skeletons respond in turn, making the fight a little closer than I would have liked. After breaking the world's strongest skeleton, I unearth withers so I have access to the respec function for my party. I don't really have a plan to use it for now, but it's nice to have it when you're in a challenge run like this. I run into a pair of absolute cultists looming over a True Soul's body, who I decide to attack instead of sending to their deaths in the Owlbear Cave. Altruistic, no? I should mention the reason I picked Half Orc as my race was for the passive feature called Savage Attacks, which adds an extra dice of weapon damage to all of my critical attacks. The Jonkler gets a promotion into the Berserker subclass. This time I intend to use this for the Frenzied Attack, which allows us to use main hand attacks as a bonus action. A key moment here is that Astarion ranks up and he's able to pick the subclass Thief, which gives him an extra bonus action. I probably don't need to tell you why this is so awesome, but it would be amazing moving ahead. On the Blighted Village approach, I decide to take the back entrance to the Sleeping Bugbear, who I get a free critical for an extreme 16 damage due to him sleeping. The others clean up and I get on the roof to begin the fight with the others. I struggle as these fights go on, the range of our attacks is very underwhelming and we're not able to dash to get around the fight. We end up getting kited pretty hard and I have to reload a few times. There was this run where Shadowheart and Astarion were locked into this animation, which I thought was pretty funny. This one here gives me some favourable damage rolls which lets us clear the rooftop, giving us time to set up for the goblins across the way to storm over. This goblin booyah goes down to Astarion and the Jonkler's fire-dipped attacks, as does the pair of rangers that remain. I take a long rest where Astarion tries to take all of my blood. I refuse as I really can't afford the -1 to my attack rolls. I miss enough as it is.
It's not what it looks like.
I pick another fight with a small group of goblins to the south of the village, which go down pretty easy. The brawler dies to a critical shank, as does the goblin warrior. Now this is a cool part. This is the exact moment where I start to realise why Astarion can potentially deal 2 instances of damage when he attacks sometimes. This is because the sneak attack that rogues have can actually trigger automatically on offhand attacks as a reaction when an ally is within 1.5 meters of the enemy you're attacking. Dealing a critical hit has its own unique version of this, but both can only trigger once per turn. Now I know I don't have to say this, but this doesn't expend the character's reaction point, so there's no bamboozle there. Seeing Astarion's insane combat potential, I reclassed Lae'zel into a rogue thief as well, equipping her with a finesse weapon in her offhand to take advantage of her recently raised dexterity score. Now that we're respect, I make a point of causing a fight outside the goblin camp. As is customary, I push the ranger off the cliff before running up to the war drum to aggro the remaining enemies. They rush towards the Jonkler, ready to beat the ever-loving hell out of her. I use Frenzy, ready for the onslaught to begin. A slew of goblins run towards her, dealing minor damage. The Jonkler retaliates with a frenzied strike and Shadowheart summons a spiritual weapon using a bonus action. I realised that the Jonkler is inflicted with a debuff called Frenzied Strain, which is given to the user after they've casted Frenzied Strike, lowering her attack rolls by 1 for each turn it has remaining. Luckily, the spiritual weapon outdoes itself, dealing a decent amount of damage and carrying the fight. Now, don't worry, the spiritual weapon exclusively uses bonus actions to fuel its attacks, so no loopholes here either. Shadowheart's spiritual weapon flies across to the final goblin, executing him with an impressive 11 force damage. Since the Jonkler had a real rough time during this fight, I reclass her into a rogue thief. The thing I didn't actually see coming here is that I'm carrying way too much garbage for someone with like 2 strength. The real challenge of this run will be refraining from picking up literally everything I see with my original character. Wasting no time, I sneak attack these goblins here with the Jonkler, who apparently is capable of dealing 28 damage on a critical hit, nuking the warlock and making the fight very easy. I position Astarion to threaten both of the remaining goblins, allowing Lae'zel to deal immense damage thanks to the sneak attack reaction. The Absolute attempts to dominate our minds, but Shadowheart uses a bonus action to roll a cool looking d20 to break the spell. I buy the Gloves of Archery off of the Goblin Trader. They increase the archery damage of the wielder by 2, which is always helpful. My plan comes to fruition when I meet with Roa Moonglow, who sells 2 hand crossbows, one normal and the other enchanted. I spend a small fortune buying them off of her and equipping the pair on Astarion, as well as the gloves from earlier. Dual-wielding hand crossbows grants access to the ability Offhand Attack Ranged, which uses a bonus action to fire the offhand crossbow. Having one equipped in your main hand also gives the ability Mobile Shot, which lets you fire the main hand crossbow on a bonus action if you've dashed or disengaged this round. It's annoying to use, but it's always nice to have options. I should note you can only use it once per short rest. I ambush Priestess Gut in her chambers, encircling her with the Jonkler, Shadowheart and Lae'zel and having Astarion hide out of sight. The Jonkler opens with a critical offhand shank of 21 damage, which Astarion follows up with an offhand crossbow bolt of 16 damage. Shadowheart manages to clutch the final offhand blow, allowing us to beat the fight without our enemy having a single turn. Using this insane momentum, we rescue Volo, murdering this goblin, which causes another one to show up. He also dies. I try to hide the body to no avail, and then decide to unload on the goblin boss outside. I one round the goblin torturers, moving on this creep, obliterating him too. The combined force of 3 rogues stealth striking anyone is very deadly, but I have a feeling this damage might begin to fall off at some point. Despite Minthara witnessing me murder a goblin, she's totally cool with me setting up behind her in her blind spot for an ambush. I open with a stealth strike, which Astarion follows up with a stealth charged offhand crossbow attack. Lae'zel shanks her in the kidneys, and then Shadowheart uses her bonus action to crit her over the head with an axe. Changing focus to the bewildered goblin by her side, Lae'zel crits them for 21 damage, allowing the Jonkler to follow up with an uppercut stab as a bonus action. I steal Minthara's clothes, waste not or whatnot. I meet with Draw Ragslin, who's interrogating the corpse of a squid. I derail his investigation as hard as I can, putting him in a real bad mood. He retreats to his throne, which is exactly where I want him. Normally, I would have a character in my party strong enough to push Draw into his world-famous hole, but not this time. I send Shadowheart back to respec to a life domain cleric and get enough strength to launch him to his death. After some basic repositioning of other party members, I execute the plan. Astarion lurks above on the beams while Lae'zel and the Jongleur are positioned near key targets to incur the damage bonus of sneak attack when Astarion fires. We get a few incredibly lucky dodges and strike back hard. The fight ends and we loot what we can get from the corpses and use Draw Ragzlin's key to access the vault. We get the gloves of the growling underdog, which is always extremely useful in melee builds. I draw out the goblins guarding the warg pen, ambushing them to deadly effect. This one didn't even join the fight, so he just gets the rogue stealth strike treatment. The party enters the warg pens, where we're discovered by the guard near the door. He dies to an insane damage roll from Astarion, and we push through to draw some aggro away from the encaged allied bear. The Druid Holson gets to work, putting our damage rolls to shame in executing this goblin. Astarion snipes the Beastmaster, and we all work together to dispatch the escaped wargs. We let Holson know that the goblin leaders are all defeated and we've saved the grove. He transforms into a rat and runs away. As a reward for this fight, we find the Linebreaker boots, which are a really neat item for this setup in particular. They grant the user 2 stacks of Wrath when they dash. Wrath increase the damage the recipient deals by 1 for each turn it has remaining. This is the perfect storm for a rogue thief, as they can dash as a bonus action twice, which lets them easily hit the stack limit for this buff in a couple of turns of combat. The stack limit is 7, by the way. We meet the Devil Raphael, trying our best to be pleasant as I have a goblin fight to get back to.
Come.
I start a fight in the main hall before I'm ready, scrambling to make sure everyone climbs to the top floor to let Astarion use his crossbows to deal good damage with the height advantage. Shadowheart makes sure to keep things interesting by summoning a spiritual weapon to wreak havoc on the battlefield. I didn't even think of this originally, but the summon can actually threaten enemies, which greatly enhances Astarion's damage output, without endangering any party members. Astarion gets a lucky crit to finish the fight, and we promote to level 4. The Jongleur takes the Dual Wielder feat, which allows her to use non-light weapons while dual wielding. As a nice little bonus on top of that, her armor class will also be increased by 1. Shadowheart takes the Heavy Armor Master perk to reduce incoming damage by 3. Astarion takes the Sharpshooter perk, which removes the penalty for low ground ranged attacks and also allows to toggle the passive All In, which increases the damage roll of an attack by 10 at the cost of reducing the attack roll by 5. Using this as a gamble could very well pay off against enemies we can stack advantage against. To finish, Lae'zel also takes the Dual Wielder perk, as Jongleur did. To celebrate, I give Lae'zel my only rapier to use in her offhand. It increases her potential damage output and also looks really cool. We meet again with Holson in the Grove, who rewards us with a whole bunch of stuff we can't use, but are grateful for anyways. He joins the group and tells us to head through the Underdark towards Moonrise Towers for the salvation we seek. Before I do that, I get into a fight to test the limits of our new build. The fight is quickly ended when Fazerk bombs himself right as Astarion shoots a bolt through his skull, stopping us from really testing the extent of our new power. Disappointed, I move to the goblin camp to clear out the yard. After a very close fight, we're able to dispatch all of the enemies in the yard. With that fight cleared, I move north to the Risen Road to seek more combat. I murder 2 dying hyenas, but then the remaining lot all transform into gross, bloody gnolls seeking revenge. I send in the rest of my stealth squad to quickly clear out the stragglers, using Astarion's new all-in passive to deal 27 damage without crits to finish the fight. I head up towards the Paladins of Tyr, who I almost managed to defeat, but get stuck with Shadowheart, who doesn't have an offhand equipped right now, so she can't attack Anders. I reload and try a different setup. I lure out the Paladins after dispatching Cyril in the side room, readying for an ambush using Shadowheart as a bait while the rogues all initiate stealth. Shadowheart brings out the spiritual weapon, which diverts some aggro away from her due to its low armor class. The ranger, Trin, decides to head around the outside to attack us, which buys us a lot of time to wail on Anders. Astarion and the Jonkler join the fight while Lae'zel heads up and over to attack from the other side of the door. Anders falls, leaving us to chase up Trin so she can meet the same fate. We meet with Karlach and tell her the good news. The Paladins are no longer after her. She tries to join our party, but it's very full and I probably don't need a barbarian right now. I run into the gnolls assaulting the cave and convince the leader to turn on his own crew and work with us to carry out mass slaughter. Having outlived his usefulness, I ask him very nicely to kill himself now! He obliges and we convince the Zhentarim to give us the treasure they were guarding. He likes the cut of our jibs, so he invites us to his clubhouse, should we find ourselves in the area. On my way over to the Zhent party, I stumble upon a burning building. I make my way inside and assist the Flaming Fist in saving their own people. I manage to get myself killed on this pool of fire and electrified steam, having forgotten to save after our daring rescue. I eventually find the clubhouse I was told so much about, but it turns out to be a trap because he's in a lot of trouble from his own people. I barge right in and I convince them to let me live. All they ask in return is that I execute this new friend. Shadowheart is more than willing to acquiesce, but this game actually forces you to use a main hand attack to do so, voiding the run. Now, if you decline to kill him, they get really mad and decide that you should both die. Initiating combat just lets them nuke you with the copious amount of smoke powder they have scattered about their cave hideout. Instead, I manage to initiate the same conversation from the other side of the room, which allows us to avoid the explosives and set up an ambush while the other members are stealthed. I push further into the cave, where they keep their treasure to find yet more Zhent and get to work. Looting the corpses of our foes, we find 3 more hand crossbows, giving a pair to Lae'zel and 1 to the Jonkler, allowing us more ranged attacks per turn. The entrance to the Underdark here is guarded by a pair of Minotaurs who have a lot of health. Using some positional trickery and abusing the all-in perk, we're able to safely make it through the fight despite them jumping up to our location. We enter the Myconid colony and meet the hobgoblin Blurg, who introduces us to his boyfriend Omaloon. He tasks us with looking for some mushroom spores in the Arcane Tower, which we'll get right back to. The trader Jereth sells us another hand crossbow, which finishes the Jonkler's pair. We now have access to 3 rogues with off-handed ranged attacks. What an exciting moment. I head to the Sursa Bark Tree and take on some hook horrors, making sure to abuse stealth in the process. After defeating 2 of them, I make off with the Sursa Bark to make the Masterwork weapon, which may come in handy when I bother to do the quest. I travel down to meet Gek Cole and his retinue of dwarves. As usual, I push this dwarf off here before I start fighting just to make life a little bit easier. I take a long rest as part of this setup and I run into the Dream Visitor. She's a very striking woman who explains to me that she needs my help because her rave is getting raided by the FBI. I agree to help, but mostly just so I can get back to the fight I was setting up prior. I use a generous helping of explosive barrels and a fire-dipped hand crossbow bolt to initiate the fight against the Druaga. But a lucky stealth check makes sure that there are literally no consequences to exploding the little guy. Taking my wins where I can get them, I take his boat and travel across the Glimmersea, where we're given an armed escort to the shores of the Grimforge. As Holson said, there is a way to Moonrise Tower somewhere around here, so we're happy to take this detour. We're told that a true soul has managed to get himself stuck behind some rocks, and this pair of Druaga are more than happy for any help in giving this Nair what's coming to him. As any rogue would, we take out the camera before we break Nair out. I send Lae'zel and Asterion to hide up high so we can get some easy cheap shots on Nair before my whole team gets their minds exploded. We get to work abusing this vantage point, having Shadowheart and Jonklor on the ground to threaten them for the rogue damage bonus. I get my payment for helping with Nair, and I get him to leave behind the gnomes so I can be friends with him. I try to loot Nair's corpse, but no one can mind their own damn business and are all giving me grief. In concluding this fight, we advance to level 5. The Jonklor, Astarion and Lae'zel are all granted the passive feat called Uncanny Dodge, which will reduce all damage taken by half, which sounds pretty damn fantastic. Shadowheart unlocks level 3 spell slots, which we can get Mass Healing Word, which only uses a bonus action, which is fair game. I return to take Nair's head for the Myconid colony, and also remember to return to the forge in the Blighted village to craft the Masterwork weapon. I decide to craft the Circe dagger, which has a +1 enchantment and also silences on hit, which might be the only way we can get that status effect to proc in this entire playthrough. I brag to Sovereign Glut that I've defeated all of the Druaga, and he asks for proof. I take him to their corpses, but instead of being impressed, he decides to try and kill me. But I silence him with my brand new weapon, which I think may have helped us win the fight easily, along with some very favourable damage rolls. I advance on the Arcane Tower to wrap up the Omerloom questline, getting the alchemy ingredients I need and meeting an automaton in the process. I return to the reformed Mind Flayer and he brews me a very bad potion that I'm told makes my parasite even stronger than before. He offers to sell me a ring that weakens the influence the parasite has over me, but it just gives advantage on saving throws against Charmed, which is much worse than he made it out to be. Having concluded all of my business in the Underdark, I proceed into the elevator to begin Act 2. That being said, that's as far as we'll go for now. All going well, this video should come out very close to my other video about Baldur's Gate without weapons or spells, so again, if you like this video, I urge you to head over and watch that video too. I haven't decided which challenge run I want to complete first. I did these both at the same time just so it didn't get boring and monotonous, so I'm going to keep an eye on which video people responded better to and move on from there. Please like, comment and subscribe if you like this video. I'll catch you in the next. Peace!